Thousands of far-left extremists stormed the barricades of the White House, fought with hundreds, if not several hundred police officers, injuring around between 70 and 140. They firebombed the White House grounds. That's true. They set fire to a guard tower, and they set fire to St. John's Church. This is a historical church the Founding Fathers would go to. It was so severe that the president was forced into his emergency bunker, thus disrupting his official duties. And
really?
Yes.
Wow.
And my question is, where was our commission? Where was the, the photos of that day when, I go to family gatherings over the holidays and I show a photo of an aerial shot of DC, which many of you may have seen, smoke rising out all around the White House and the surrounding areas from fires that were being lit. Mm-hmm. The president was forced into an emergency bunker against his will, and the media made fun of him and called him Bunker Boy for having had to experience this. Mm-hmm. Donald Trump said, I went down, they showed me it, he clearly didn't want to be there. When law enforcement then cleared out the extremists who had laid siege to the White House, I'm being purposefully hyperbolic, you understand why, Donald Trump came out the next day and took a picture, and they attacked him and insulted him for having defended the White House and a church that was set on fire by an extremist faction. A faction so extreme, in fact, that similar groups and cells within the same ideology had seized several blocks in various cities. In Atlanta, in Seattle, in their Capitol Hill occupation, and in Minnesota with George Floyd Square. Yeah. Videos emerged out of, I believe it was Seattle, of armed groups walking around with AR-15s, pointing them at drivers. People of a similar or same ideology, in fact, many of these people do coordinate, engaged in insurrection. Now, of course, we can calm down and say a bunch of extremist activists rioting in the streets, no insurrection. Oh, fair point. Then neither was the Capitol.
Well, what about Brett Kavanaugh? Was anybody alive for the Brett Kavanaugh hearings? Do you remember them storming in, going into senators' offices? I'm telling you, D.C. was insane, and nobody cared until January 6th happened. This was like a routine thing that was happening to get their ideas across. They were doing sit-ins. They were walking in, in the halls uninvited. They couldn't get these people out. It's just crazy to think that suddenly they focused on January 6th, and it's hard to imagine that the feds were not in on it when we know we have all of these pieces of footage.
Right. At the very least. One thing, because I think there's two strands here. Both are I think there's two different points, and both are interesting. But I think it's important not to mix them up because it might risk us missing the real plot here, which is, one is, have we applied the different standard of rule of law throughout this country over the course of 2020? Absolutely we did. Antifa, BLM, you name it. If you have a left-wing ideology, it was a mostly peaceful protest, you ignore it. That's a glaring point and deserves to be called out. And I think that there can be no justice with two standards of the rule of law based on your political ideology. I think, to be clear, what happened on January 6th was not some small joke. This was significant in terms of the number of people, in terms of, some of the video footage the mainstream media picked out. But I think what's significant about it is we don't know what actually caused those people to act the way they did. Was it really the government instigating something that otherwise didn't exist, using it as a deflection to achieve a national security state's revival that had otherwise receded over the course of 20 years since the post-9/11 period? And so maybe I've just told you what I actually think is going on here. But that's what I think the facts suggest, is there was a reason for these people to not only get Donald Trump out of office, but to discredit this, to relegate this line of thinking, the movement behind him, to the dustbins of history. And this was the way to do it. So I think that there was a lot of depth to this, and it wasn't just that, okay, well, these are two different standards, two different bad things. Yes. But this was, I think, a very serious forethought exercise in accomplishing something. And unless we see through it, first step when you see a problem is to name it. Unless we do that, they are going to accomplish what they set out to accomplish. That's what I believe.